The shuttle was falling apart around her, and Dr. Elena Vasquez could do nothing but hold on and pray. Warning lights flashed red across every screen in the cockpit, and the automated voice kept repeating the same terrible words over and over again. Critical engine failure. Critical engine failure. Brace for impact. Elena gripped the armrests of her seat so hard that her knuckles turned white, and she watched through the cracked windshield as the planet below grew larger and larger. With every passing second, Vareth 4 was beautiful from space, covered in thick forest that glowed with soft blue and purple light even from orbit. But Elena knew the truth about this world that everyone in the galaxy feared. The Galactic Concord had classified it as a death world more than 300 years ago, and no survey team had ever returned from its surface alive. The shuttle shook violently as it entered the atmosphere, and flames licked at the edges of the windows while Elena closed her eyes and thought about all the choices that had led her to this moment. She was a xenobiologist, one of the best in the human colonies, and she had been on a simple mission to study plant life on a Moon 3 systems, away when her navigation computer had malfunctioned and sent her ship spinning off course. Now she was about to crash on the one planet in this sector that guaranteed death to any visitor. The impact came suddenly, and Elena felt her body slam against the restraints as the shuttle tore through massive trees and carved a path of destruction through the glowing forest. Metal screamed and glass shattered, and then everything went dark and silent when Elena opened her eyes again. She was hanging upside down in her seat, blood dripping from a cut on her forehead. The shuttle had come to rest against an enormous tree trunk. Its hull cracked open like an egg, and sparks flew from destroyed control panels all around her. She released her restraints carefully and fell to what had been the ceiling, gasping at the pain in her ribs where the seatbelts had bruised her. "Okay, Elena," she said to herself in a shaky voice. "You survived the crash, so that means you can survive whatever comes next." She crawled through the wreckage toward the breach in the hull, grabbing her emergency pack and medkit along the way. And when she finally pulled herself out into the open air of Vareth 4, she stopped breathing for a moment. The forest was unlike anything she had ever seen in all her years of exploring alien worlds. Every tree rose hundreds of meters into the sky, their bark smooth and dark as obsidian, and their leaves glowed with an inner light that painted everything in shades of blue and violet and soft pink. Bioluminescent moss covered the ground like a carpet of stars, and strange flowers pulsed with slow rhythms as if they had heartbeats of their own. It was beautiful, hauntingly beautiful, and Elena almost forgot for a moment that this paradise was home to the most dangerous predators in the known galaxy. The Vorok. She had read about them in classified reports that she was not supposed to have access to. Reports that described creatures of nightmare and shadow. They were massive pack hunters, standing 3 meters tall at the shoulder, with 6 powerful legs and scales as black as the void between stars. Their eyes glowed amber in the darkness, and their fangs could tear through starship armor like paper. Every species that had ever landed on Vareth AV had been hunted down and slaughtered by the Vorok within hours of arrival. The Galactic Concord did not even bother sending rescue missions anymore, because rescue teams simply became more prey for the endless hunger of the pack. Elena checked her distress beacon and felt her heart sink when she saw the cracked casing and the flickering light that meant it was barely functioning. If a signal got out at all, it would take weeks for anyone to receive it, and even longer for a ship to reach her. She had to survive on her own until then. On a world where survival was supposed to be impossible, she set up a small camp near the wreckage of her shuttle, because the twisted metal provided some shelter, and she used emergency rations from her pack for her first meal on this alien world. The food tasted like cardboard, but Elena forced herself to eat every bite because she needed her strength for whatever challenges lay ahead. As the light in the forest began to dim and the glow of the plants grew brighter, Elena built a small fire using chemical fuel from her emergency kit. Fire was primitive, she knew, but there was something comforting about its warmth and light that no amount of advanced technology could replace. She sat with her back against the shuttle hull and watched the shadows between the trees, her hand resting on the small plasma pistol at her hip. The weapon would do nothing against a Varrock, she knew, but holding it made her feel slightly less helpless. Hours passed, and Elena began to think that maybe, just maybe, the creatures had not noticed her crash landing. And then she saw the eyes. They appeared one by one in the darkness beyond her firelight. Glowing amber orbs that watched her without blinking. Elena counted them silently. Her breath caught in her throat. 2 eyes, then 4, then 8. Then too many to count. They were everywhere, surrounding her camp in a perfect circle, and she could hear them now. The soft sounds of massive bodies moving through the undergrowth with terrible grace. The Varrock had found her. Elena stood slowly, not wanting to make any sudden movements, and she looked into those dozens of glowing eyes with a strange calm that surprised even herself. She had always known that death would find her someday, on some distant world far from the home she had left behind so many years ago. If this was her end, she would face it standing. But the attack did not come. The Varrock watched her through the long hours of the night, never advancing, never retreating, just watching with those intelligent amber eyes that seemed to see right through her. When the forest began to brighten with the coming of dawn, the eyes slowly faded away one by one, and Elena was left alone with her racing heart and a terrible question. Why had they let her live? She did not know the answer, but she knew one thing for certain. They would be back. And next time they might not be so patient. Elena checked her supplies, tended to her wounds, and prepared for another day on this world that wanted her dead, somewhere out there in the glowing forest. The Varrock were waiting, and Elena could not shake the feeling that her story on this planet was only just beginning. 3 days had passed since Elena crashed on Barath 4, and she was still alive against all odds. Every night the Varrock came to watch her from the darkness, their amber eyes glowing like small fires in the shadows. And every morning they vanished back into the forest without attacking. Elena did not understand why they had not killed her yet, but she was not going to question her luck. She spent her days exploring the area around her crashed shuttle, mapping water sources and edible plants, always staying close enough to run back to her camp if danger appeared. The forest was full of wonders that made her xenobiologist heart sing with excitement. She found flowers that changed color when she touched them, insects with wings like stained glass windows, and small creatures that seemed to be made entirely of light. Under different circumstances, she would have spent years studying this incredible ecosystem. But right now, she had more pressing concerns. Her water supply was running low, and the small stream she had been using was starting to dry up. She needed to find a better source, which meant venturing deeper into Varrock territory than she had dared to go before. Elena packed her medkit, her water containers, and her useless little pistol, and she set out into the glowing forest with her heart pounding in her chest. She walked for hours, following the sounds of running water that echoed through the massive trees. And she tried not to think about the eyes she could feel watching her from the shadows. The Varrock were following her, she knew, keeping pace with her through the undergrowth like ghosts made of darkness and muscle. Finally, she found what she was looking for, a small river that sparkled with clean water, fed by a waterfall that tumbled down from rocks covered in luminescent moss. Elena knelt by the water and filled her containers, drinking deeply from her cupped hands and savoring the cool sweetness on her tongue. She was about to head back to camp when she heard a sound that made her freeze in place. A high-pitched cry of pain and fear that came from somewhere nearby. Every instinct told her to run, to get back to her camp as fast as possible, because that cry could only belong to one type of creature on this world. But Elena was not the kind of person who could ignore suffering, no matter how dangerous the source might be. She followed the sounds through a tangle of fallen branches and debris. And when she pushed through a curtain of hanging vines, she found herself at the edge of her shuttle's debris field. Pieces of her ship had scattered across a wide area during the crash. And among the twisted metal and shattered equipment, she saw something that made her breath catch in her throat. It was a Varrock, but not one of the massive adults that had been watching her camp. This one was young, barely larger than a big dog from Earth, with scales that had not yet darkened to full black and eyes that were more gold than amber. The cub was trapped. One of its hind legs caught under a heavy piece of shuttle hull, and a jagged shard of metal had pierced through its flesh. Blood pooled beneath the creature, dark and thick, and the cub was crying out in pain and terror as it struggled to free itself. Elena stood at the edge of the clearing and stared at the injured animal, her mind racing with impossible choices. If she walked away, the cub would die slowly from blood loss and infection, suffering for hours or maybe days before the end came. But if she tried to help, the cub might attack her, or worse, its cries might bring the adult Varrock running. She thought about all the reports she had read, all the warnings about how the Varrock showed no mercy and knew no fear. She thought about her own survival and how foolish it would be to risk everything for a creature that would probably try to kill her the moment it was free. And then she thought about who she was and what she believed in, and she knew that she could not leave a suffering creature to die alone. "Okay, little one," she said softly as she stepped into the clearing. "I am going to help you, so please try not to bite my hands off." The cub saw her approach and went wild with panic, snapping its small but sharp fangs at the air and trying desperately to drag itself away. Elena moved slowly, keeping her hands visible and her voice low and gentle, the way she had learned to approach frightened animals on a dozen different worlds. She, it is okay. I am not going to hurt you. I promise." She knelt beside the trapped cub and examined the wound carefully, wincing at how deep the metal had gone. The leg was not broken, which was good, but the infection had already started to set in, and the cub would lose the limb if she did not act quickly. Elena opened her medkit and pulled out antiseptic, biofoam, bandages, and a small injector of pain medication. "This is going to hurt for a moment," she told the cub, even though she knew it could not understand her words. "But then it will feel much better. I promise." She administered the pain medication first, and the cub flinched at the needle but did not bite her as the drugs took effect and the cub's struggles grew weaker. Elena worked quickly to remove the metal shard, clean the wound, and apply the biofoam that would seal it against infection. She used strips from her own shirt to create a bandage and splint, wrapping the injured leg with gentle hands that had healed many creatures over the years. When she was finished, the cub lay still and watched her with those golden eyes, no longer crying, no longer struggling. It looked at her as if it was trying to understand what she was. This strange soft creature that had caused it pain and then made the pain go away. Elena sat back on her heels and smiled at her small patient, feeling a warmth in her chest that she had not felt since landing on this deadly world. "There you go, little one. You are going to be just fine now." And then she heard the sound of massive bodies moving through the forest behind her, and she turned to see Death walking out of the shadows. The alpha female was enormous, the largest Varrock Elena had seen, with scars across her muzzle and eyes that burned with ancient intelligence. She stalked toward Elena on 6 silent legs, her fangs bared and her body tense to strike, and behind her came the rest of the pack, dozens of hunters spreading out to surround the clearing. Elena did not run because she knew that running would mean instant death. Instead, she stood slowly and stepped aside, gesturing toward the cub with its fresh bandages and splinted leg. "I helped your baby," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I did not hurt it, I helped it. Please understand." The alpha stopped so close that Elena could feel the heat of her breath. could see her own reflection in those terrible amber eyes. For a long moment, nothing moved, nothing breathed. And Elena waited for the end that she was certain had finally come. Then the Alpha turned away from Elena and went to her cub, sniffing the bandages, licking the small face, making low sounds that might have been comfort or might have been something else entirely. The cub made a sound in response, weak but alive. And the Alpha looked back at Elena with an expression that the human could not read. The attack never came. One by one, Dvorak settled onto the ground around the clearing, their eyes still watching, but their bodies relaxed. And Elena realized with growing wonder that she had just done something that no being in the galaxy had ever done before. She had shown kindness to a Dvorak, and somehow, impossibly, they had understood. Elena woke the next morning to find that she was not alone in her camp. The Dvorak had moved in during the night, not to attack but to stay. And now a dozen of the massive creatures lay scattered around the clearing like great dark statues carved from shadow. The Alpha female rested near the remains of the fire, and beside her lay the cub with its bandaged leg, looking much stronger than it had the day before. Elena sat up slowly in her sleeping roll, afraid to make any sudden movements that might startle the predators surrounding her. The Dvorak simply watched her with calm eyes, showing no aggression, no hunger, nothing but what seemed almost like curiosity. "Wow," Elena said softly to herself. "This is new." She went about her morning routine as normally as she could, eating breakfast from her dwindling supplies, checking her equipment, tending to the small tasks that kept her alive on this hostile world. The Dvorak watched everything she did with intense interest, their heads tilting this way and that as they observed this strange creature who had invaded their territory when Elena approached the cub to check its wound. The Alpha tensed for a moment but did not interfere. The cub allowed Elena to remove the old bandage and examine the healing flesh beneath. And it even made a soft sound that might have been pleasure when she scratched gently behind its small ears. "You are healing well, little one," Elena said with a smile. "Another few days and you will be running around causing trouble again." She applied fresh medication and a new bandage. And when she stepped back, the Alpha rose and walked over to inspect her work. The massive predator sniffed the bandage carefully, then turned those amber eyes to Elena and made a low rumbling sound deep in her chest. No idea what the sound meant, but somehow she felt that it was not a threat. Days passed and turned into weeks, and the impossible became normal. The Dvorak did not leave Elena's camp, and she did not try to make them go. She learned their rhythms and their ways, watching how the pack interacted with each other, how the Alpha maintained order with nothing more than a look or a soft growl. She gave them names in her head, human names that probably did not fit creatures so alien and wild. But it helped her feel less alone. The Alpha she called Midnight, because of her dark scales and the way she seemed to melt into shadows. The cub she called Hope because its survival against all odds reminded her of her own situation. There was a scarred male she called Thunder for the deep rumbling sounds he made, and a sleek female she called Ghost because she moved so silently that Elena often lost track of her entirely. On the 5th day after the cub's rescue, Elena woke to find a dead animal lying outside her shelter. It was some kind of forest creature, something like a deer but with 6 legs and iridescent fur. And it had been killed recently enough that the meat was still fresh. Elena stared at the offering for a long moment before she understood what it meant. Morak were feeding her as she looked up to find Midnight watching from across the clearing. And Elena nodded slowly in gratitude. "Thank you," she said, knowing the words meant nothing to the alien creature. "Thank you for taking care of me." From that day forward, the pack brought her food regularly, fresh kills that supplemented her emergency rations and kept her strong. Elena cooked the meat over her fire, and she noticed that the Dvorak watched the flames with fascination rather than fear. She started leaving portions of cooked meat for them to try. And while most of them preferred their food raw, Hope the cub developed a taste for the strange prepared food that the human made. The cub followed Elena everywhere now. Its leg healed enough for it to walk and even run, though it still limped slightly on the injured limb when Elena went to gather water. Hope came with her while Elena explored the forest looking for useful plants. Hope padded along at her side like a strange alien dog, and always, the rest of the pack shadowed them both. Silent guardians that kept Elena safe from all the other dangers that lurked. In the depths of Varath, Elena began keeping detailed notes on everything she observed about the Varak. She recorded their social structure, their hunting techniques, their communication methods that seemed to rely on a complex combination of sounds, body language, and something else that she could not quite identify. The Galactic Concord had classified them as non-sapient, as mindless predators driven by nothing but instinct and hunger. But Elena knew now that this classification was completely wrong. The Varak were intelligent. Perhaps as intelligent as humans in their own alien way. They remembered things, learned things, made decisions based on more than just survival instinct. They showed affection to their young and loyalty to their pack. They had looked at Elena, seen that she had helped one of their own, and they had made a choice to protect her rather than destroy her. That choice was not instinct. That choice was thought, reason, understanding. Elena realized that she was witnessing something that no other being in the galaxy had ever seen. She was living among the Varak as a member of their pack, accepted and protected by creatures that the rest of the universe feared as monsters. She had to survive long enough to share this knowledge, to change everything that the galaxy believed about this world and its inhabitants. One evening, as the forest glowed with its nightly display of bioluminescence, Elena sat by her fire with Hope curled up beside her. Midnight lay nearby, her great head resting on her paws, her amber eyes reflecting the dancing flames. The other pack members were scattered around the camp, some sleeping, some watching the darkness for threats. Elena looked up at the stars visible through gaps in the forest canopy, wondering if anyone out there was looking for her, wondering if rescue would ever come. You know, she said to Midnight, who she had gotten into the habit of talking to, even though the Varak could not understand her words. I used to be so afraid of being alone, but I do not feel alone anymore. Not with all of you here. Midnight made a soft sound in response. Something that almost seemed like agreement. Hope shifted in her sleep and pressed closer to Elena's side, seeking warmth and comfort from this strange creature who had saved her life. Elena stroked the cub's smooth scales and felt tears prickling at her eyes, not from sadness but from something else. Something she had not expected to find on this death world that everyone had warned her about. She had found a family, not the family she had left behind on Earth, not the colleagues she had worked with on research stations across the galaxy, but a family nonetheless. The Varak had taken her in, made her one of their own. And Elena knew in her heart that she would do anything to protect them, just as they protected her somewhere in the galaxy. Ships were flying, and civilizations were rising and falling, and beings of 1,000 different species were living their complicated lives. But here, on a small clearing on a forbidden world, a human and a pack of predators had formed a bond that no one would have believed possible. Elena smiled and leaned back against Midnight's warm flank, feeling the slow rhythm of the great creature's breathing. Whatever came next, she knew that she would face it together with her pack, and that knowledge made her feel stronger than she had ever felt before. The ship came screaming out of the sky on Elena's 42nd day on Varath IV. She heard it before she saw it. A roar of engines that sent flocks of glowing birds scattering from the treetops and made the Varak leap to their feet with growls of alarm. Elena ran to the edge of the clearing and looked up through the forest canopy, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. A shuttle was descending through the atmosphere. But it was not the kind of shuttle that carried rescue teams or scientists. This ship was built for war, with heavy armor plating and weapon systems visible even from the ground. Symbol on its hull made Elena's blood run cold, a red claw on a black field. The mark of the Torvan mercenary corps. The Torvan were one of the most feared species in the galaxy. Reptilian warriors who sold their services to the highest bidder and asked no questions about the jobs they were hired to do if they were here. It meant that someone had sent them, and Elena had a terrible feeling that she knew why the Galactic Concord had strict protocols about death worlds, about contamination and containment, and making sure that nothing from such planets ever threatened the rest of civilized space. When a ship crashed on a death world, the Concord did not send rescue teams. They sent cleanup crews. Elena watched the shuttle land in a clearing about a kilometer away, and she made a decision that she knew might be the last decision she ever made. She was not going to hide. She was not going to run. She was going to meet these visitors face to face and hope that she could convince them to let her live. She turned to find Midnight, watching her with those knowing amber eyes, and she placed her hand gently on the great predator's muzzle. "Stay here," Elena said softly. "I need to deal with this alone. I do not want any of you getting hurt." Midnight made a low sound that might have been disagreement, but Elena was already walking toward the place where the ship had landed. She did not look back, but she could hear the pack moving through the forest around her, shadows keeping pace with her steps. So much for dealing with this alone, she thought with a grim smile. The Torvan were waiting for her when she reached their landing site. A squad of 8 heavily armed soldiers, surrounding their shuttle with weapons raised and scanners sweeping the forest. Their leader was a massive specimen, even by Torvan standards, with scales the color of dried blood and cybernetic implants. Replacing one eye and both arms, he saw Elena emerge from the tree line, and his remaining eye widened with what might have been surprise. Well, he said in a voice like grinding stones. "The human is still alive. How unexpected." Elena stopped at the edge of the clearing and kept her hands visible, trying to look harmless, even though she knew that the Torvan would not be fooled. "I am Dr. Elena Vasquez," she said clearly, "xenobiologist with the Human Colonial Research Division, and I would very much appreciate it if you could give me a ride off this planet." The Torvan captain laughed, a harsh barking sound that held no warmth or humor. "I am afraid that will not be possible, Dr. Vasquez. You see, we are not here to rescue you. We are here to sterilize this crash site and eliminate any contamination that might have spread." He raised his plasma rifle and pointed it at Elena's chest. "You are contamination." Elena felt a strange calm settle over her, the calm of someone who has accepted their fate and found peace with it. "I understand," she said quietly. "But before you kill me, there is something you should know about this planet and its inhabitants. Something that changes everything the Concord believes." "I do not care about what you have learned," the captain said. "I have a job to do." His finger tightened on the trigger, and then the forest exploded into chaos. The Vorak came from everywhere at once, pouring out of the shadows like a living tide of darkness and fury. Midnight led the charge, her roar shaking the trees and freezing the Torvan soldiers in place with pure primal terror within seconds. The mercenaries were surrounded by more than 40 adult Vorak, each one larger and more dangerous than anything the soldiers had ever faced. The Torvan were not cowards. They had fought battles across 100 worlds and emerged victorious from situations that would have killed lesser warriors, but this was different. This was something they had never encountered before. They raised their weapons to fire. But the Vorak did not attack. Instead, they formed a perfect circle around the clearing, a wall of muscle and scale and gleaming fangs. And they waited. Midnight walked slowly toward Elena and positioned herself between the human and the captain's rifle, her amber eyes fixed on the Torvan with unmistakable threat. "What is this?" the captain demanded, his voice betraying the first hints of fear. The Vorak are supposed to be mindless killers. They should be attacking everything in sight. Elena stepped forward. Standing beside Midnight with one hand resting on the great predator's shoulder. They are not mindless, Elena said. They never were. The Concord was wrong about them. Wrong about everything. Hope emerged from the pack and came to stand at Elena's other side. The now healthy cub pressing against her leg like a loyal dog. 6 weeks ago, I found this cub injured and trapped in wreckage from my shuttle, Elena continued. I helped her. I treated her wounds and saved her life. And in return, the pack accepted me as one of their own. The captain stared at her with disbelief written across his scarred face. That is impossible. And yet here I am, Elena said. Alive and protected by creatures that should have killed me in my first hour on this planet. She met the captain's eyes without flinching. I am not asking you to believe me. I am asking you to look around and see what is right in front of you. The captain looked at the Vorak surrounding his squad, at the way they held formation without attacking, at the intelligence burning in their amber eyes. His soldiers were terrified. He could smell their fear even through his damaged senses. They had walked into a situation that their training had not prepared them for. A situation where the rules they knew no longer applied. If you try to kill me, Elena said calmly, they will destroy you, every single one of you. And there is nothing your weapons can do to stop them. She paused and let that truth sink in. But if you lower your weapons and leave peacefully, I believe they will let you go. Not because they are afraid of you, but because I am asking them to show mercy. The standoff lasted for what felt like hours. The forest holding its breath while two impossible forces faced each other across that small clearing finally. Slowly, the captain lowered his rifle. This is not over, he growled. I am going to report everything I have seen here. And the Concord will have to respond. I am counting on it, Elena said. Torvan retreated to their shuttle, moving carefully to avoid triggering an attack that they knew they could not survive as the ship lifted off and disappeared into the sky. Elena let out a breath. She had not realized she was holding Midnight rumbled softly beside her, and Hope pressed closer to her leg. And all around them, the pack slowly relaxed from their battle formation. Elena looked at her strange family, these monsters that the galaxy feared, and she smiled. Thank you, she said to them, knowing that somehow, in their own way, they understood the Torvan captain would tell the Concord what he had seen. And everything was about to change, but whatever came next, Elena knew that she would not face it alone. Her pack would be with her, and together they were stronger than anything the galaxy could send against them. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. A human scientist had survived on Vareth 4, not by hiding or running, but by earning the protection of the most feared predators in known space. The Galactic Concord demanded an explanation, and the Torvan captain gave them one. Everything they believed about the Vorak was wrong. Within weeks, a proper delegation arrived in orbit above the Forbidden World. A fleet of diplomatic ships carrying scientists and ambassadors from a dozen different species. Elena watched them descend from the sky and felt a nervousness she had not experienced since her first day on this planet. She had spent 3 months living with the pack, learning their ways, becoming one of them. And now the outside world was about to come crashing back into her life. The delegation landed at a safe distance from Elena's camp and sent a small team forward on foot, unarmed as she had requested. Leading them was a tall woman with silver hair and a uniform covered in medals and insignia, Admiral Chun, commander of the human colonial fleet and one of the most powerful people in Earth's government. Behind her came scientists from 6 different species, their equipment and scanners ready to document everything they found. Elena met them at the edge of the forest with Midnight at her side and Hope at her feet. And she saw the way their eyes widened when they realized that the massive predator was not attacking Dr. Vasquez. Admiral Chun said, her voice carefully controlled. "You have caused quite a stir." "I imagine I have," Elena replied. "But what I have discovered here is worth any amount of trouble." She led them into the camp, into the heart of Vorak territory, and she showed them the world that she had come to love. The scientists documented everything: the social structure of the pack, the way the creatures communicated, the intelligence that burned behind those amber eyes. They were amazed by what they found, and Elena could see long-held beliefs crumbling in the face of evidence. They could not deny the Vorak watched the newcomers with wariness but did not attack. Trusting Elena's judgment that these strange visitors meant no harm, Hope stayed close to Elena throughout. The cub that had started everything now fully grown and beautiful, with scales that had darkened to midnight black and eyes that gleamed like gold. "This is remarkable," said a Volanti scientist. "A being like a walking tree with leaves that shimmered in the forest light." We classified the Vorak as Category 7 hostiles, unthinking beasts driven only by predatory instinct. How did we get it so wrong? Elena looked at the scientist with a sad smile. "Because no one ever tried to understand them," she said. "Every expedition that came to this world arrived with weapons and fear, expecting monsters. And so that is exactly what they found." She gestured to the pack scattered around the clearing, to Midnight watching from the shadows, to Thunder and Ghost and all the others who had become her family. The Vorak respond to how they are treated. When met with violence, they answer with violence. But when I showed them kindness, when I helped one of their young instead of hurting it, they saw something different. Admiral Chun stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. "What you have accomplished here is unprecedented, Dr. Vasquez. The implications for interspecies relations are enormous. If we have been this wrong about the Vorak, how many other species have we misjudged? How many potential allies have we turned into enemies through our own fear and ignorance?" Elena nodded, grateful that someone in power finally understood. That is exactly the question we should be asking. The delegation stayed on Vareth 4 for 2 weeks, gathering data and building the foundation for what would become the first treaty between the Galactic Concord and a species once classified as monsters. Elena served as translator and intermediary, helping the scientists understand Vorak behavior and helping the pack understand that not all outsiders were threats. It was exhausting work, but it was also the most important thing she had ever done on the final day. A formal ceremony was held in the clearing that had once been Elena's lonely camp. Representatives from a dozen species gathered under the glowing trees of Vareth 4. And for the first time in history, a Vorak was given a voice in the councils of the galaxy. Midnight stood before the assembled delegates, her massive form casting shadows across the bioluminescent moss. And through a translation device that Elena had helped develop, she spoke. "For 10,000 turnings of our world, strangers came from the sky," Midnight said, her words slow and careful as the device converted her sounds into language that others could understand. "They came with fire and death, and so we gave them fire and death in return. We thought all sky strangers were the same." She turned to look at Elena, and there was something in those amber eyes that made everyone in the clearing hold their breath. Then the soft one came, the one who smells of kindness. She found our cub broken and bleeding, and she did not kill. She did not run. She made the cub whole again. Midnight rumbled deep in her chest. "We did not know that sky strangers could be pack. We did not know they could show mercy. The soft one taught us. And now we teach you." She faced the delegates again, and when she spoke, her words carried the weight of centuries. "The soft ones, the humans, they have sharp hearts. They are pack now. Harm them. And you answer to us?" The Torvan representative shifted uncomfortably. Several other delegates exchanged worried glances, but the human ambassador, a kind-faced man named David, who had known Elena since she was a young student, simply smiled. How did your people accomplish this? Demanded the Torvan delegate, unable to contain his frustration any longer. What secret technology or weapon did you use to bend these creatures to your will? David looked at Elena, and she nodded for him to answer. We did not use any technology, David said simply. We did not use any weapon. Dr. Vasquez saw a suffering creature, and she helped it. That is all. She just helped. The Torvan stared at him as if he had spoken in a language that had no translation. That is impossible. No one risks their life for a stranger, for a creature of another species, for something that could kill them without a second thought. Humans do, David said. Not always, not perfectly. But when we are at our best, that is exactly who we are. We see suffering, and we cannot look away. We see a wound, and we have to try to heal it. It is not a strength in the way you understand strength, but it is the most powerful thing we have. Elena watched the faces of the delegates as they struggled to understand, and she thought about everything she had learned on this world. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, full of species that had survived through strength and cunning and ruthlessness, but humans had survived through something different. Through compassion, through the stubborn refusal to abandon those in need. It was not always rewarded. It was not always wise. Sometimes it got them killed, but sometimes, in rare and wonderful moments, it changed everything. Elena looked at Midnight, at Hope, at the pack that had become her family, and she felt tears rolling down her cheeks. She had come to Varath IV expecting to die alone on a hostile world. And instead, she had found something precious beyond measure. She had found proof that kindness could conquer fear, that mercy could build bridges across any divide, that the simple act of helping another creature could transform enemies into the most loyal friends the galaxy had ever seen. And as the ceremony concluded and the delegates prepared to carry this story back to their own worlds, Elena knew that nothing would ever be the same. The humans had done what no one thought possible, not through war or conquest, but through the radical revolutionary act of caring for a single wounded child that was their gift to the galaxy. And it was a gift that would echo through the stars for generations to come.